First, I need to make it clear right off the bat that I have a huge respect for Jimmy Dore, and I will continue to follow his work. I especially appreciate him because he was one of the first people I ever saw who was brave enough to go after his own tribe. In other words, he's not afraid to criticize both friends and adversaries, which is something that has greatly influenced me. So with that being said, I need to pull a Jimmy Dore on Jimmy Dore and challenge someone I respect because no one can be right all the time. Today, I need to call Jimmy out for his strange overconfidence on the Wuhan Lab Leak theory when there still hasn't been any evidence that it came from a Chinese lab. Now, if I want to engage in the same kind of speculation that Jimmy Dore and other alt media have done, I could suggest that COVID was engineered in any of the hundreds of biolabs around the world, particularly in Ukraine, which has recently been found to have dozens of US-funded biolabs and is the most corrupt nation in Europe. Corruption is obviously strongly correlated to mass accidents and cover-ups. We could speculate that after COVID was created in one of these labs, that it was then released into Wuhan or even just naturally spread there. It is an undisputed fact that there was an international military games held in Wuhan in October 2019, which would have served as the perfect cover for NATO military personnel being present in Wuhan 1 month before any known cases of COVID were detected there. And we all know there are countries and their three-letter agencies that are willing to do something as nefarious as secretly releasing a pathogen onto a geopolitical rival. Nord Stream pipeline. Nord Stream pipeline. Now, of course, there isn't any evidence to support what I just said, but if we're choosing to make claims based on coincidences or suspicious-sounding emails, then this theory is just as good as any. But getting back to actual evidence of COVID origins, I want to show you an academic peer-reviewed primary source which is available on the public record. In other words, this is the highest level of evidence that one can find. This research paper potentially proves that COVID-19 was created in the biolabs of North Carolina. Here is a study that was published in Nature magazine in November 2015. I'll read the abstract and then you can decide for yourself. The emergence of severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus, SARS-CoV, and Middle East respiratory syndrome MERS. On the basis of these findings, we synthetically re-derived an infectious full-length SHC014 recombinant virus and demonstrate robust viral replication both in vitro and in vivo. There is even more evidence that proves that the virus was floating around the world months before it was first detected in Wuhan, China. In this Reuters article, it mentions research done in Spain that found traces of COVID-19 in sewer samples going back to March 2019, which is a good 9 months before it was detected in Wuhan. Another research article that can be found on the United States NIH website shows another study. This study published that when Italian scientists tested samples from just 5 wastewater plants, they found that Italy had COVID cases as early as December 18, 2019, which is even before Chinese authorities alerted the world about it. So while it is an undisputed fact that the authorities in Wuhan were the first to detect COVID as some new mysterious virus, factually speaking, that doesn't mean that Wuhan was the origin of it, and anyone with a brain should know that. I'm not a virologist, but I can only imagine that finding the origin of a virus is probably one of the most challenging tasks in modern science. I imagine researchers would need to sift through billions of DNA samples trying to trace exactly when, where, and in whom the virus made the fatal mutation to become the deadly variant that we all faced in 2020. But after 3 years, there is still zero scientific consensus on its origin, and maybe we'll never know. Now, if I were to present some theory of its origin, my guess would be as good as anyone else's because I'm neither a virologist or epidemiologist. I don't have any expertise in these fields, so I think my job as a news vlogger should be just to sort through the tsunami of intentionally made garbage information in order to find actual primary source evidence to inform you, my audience. And this is where I think Jimmy Dore and many alt media have gone wrong. If you watch Dore's and other vloggers' videos, they don't have a single primary source that proves it came from the Wuhan lab. And yet they'll blast this accusation all over social media as if it's a verifiable fact. This obviously doesn't help in today's era of disinformation. In Jimmy Dore's videos in particular, he consistently shows us Western media reports that simply reference US intelligence theories. Clips of Jon Stewart jumping around screaming, "Wuhan Virology Lab."
I work at the coronavirus lab in Wuhan. Oh, because there's a coronavirus loose in Wuhan. How did that happen? Maybe a bat flew into the cloaca of a turkey and then it sneezed into my chili and now we all have coronavirus. Like, come on. Okay. What about this? What about this?
Suspicious emails between Fauci and NIH and tweets from different experts. But again, none of these pieces of information remotely proves anything. In fact, I could probably do the exact same theorizing about another lab, say Fort Detrick in Maryland, which actually had an outbreak of mysterious pneumonia back in August 2019, 4 months before the outbreak started in China. But let's break down the Western media report that Jimmy Dore uses to claim that his suspicions were right. It was of course this article in the Wall Street Journal, which itself was simply based on US government agency findings. The Wall Street Journal, hardly known for any investigative journalism, published the article on February 26, 2023, which is based on a quote-unquote change of attitude in the US's Energy Department. Now why in the would the US Energy Department know anything about the origins of COVID? I have no idea. But anyway, even the US Energy Department's own report says that it is with low confidence, quote-unquote low confidence, that they believe it was likely from the Wuhan lab. In the same article, it says, quote, US officials declined to give details on the fresh intelligence and analysis that led to the Energy Department to change its position, end quote. What the actual So in fact, there is no evidence in these new reports, and it only has one agency's theory. If an agency is going to come out and say that the virus likely came from a Chinese lab, then at least give us some primary sourced evidence. To make matters even worse, the exact same article states that most US intel agencies still believe that the virus came from natural transmission. So this was basically a totally pointless and stupid article with an extremely inflammatory title and accusation. So why would the world's media all start pushing out the exact same stupid article at the exact same time when it really says nothing and adds no new evidence to the global debate? From a paranoid and geopolitical point of view, I worry that this media campaign may just be a perfectly timed psyop to get the public to hate China even more in order to manufacture more consent for war over the Chinese island of Taiwan. The island of Taiwan has in fact never ended their civil war with the mainland of China because the US Navy intervened in the late 1940s. The US government at that time supported and financially backed the Chiang Kai-shek's KMT, aka China's nationalist government, which of course lost the civil war to Mao Zedong's communists. If you've been following geopolitical news, you would already know that some factions of the US ruling class would love to make Taiwan province the next Ukraine in order to derail China's economy and to serve as a pretext for international sanctions against China. By strangling China with sanctions, the US could single-handedly cut China off from the world economy, or so they think. This of course was exactly what the US-led Western world has done with Russia, but to little success. By pushing for Taiwan independence, which goes against the internationally agreed upon one China policy, the warmongers in the US know it would guarantee a military response from mainland China. The United States, just like in Ukraine, would be able to use Taiwanese bodies to fight and die in the place of American bodies. This is done to prevent a massive domestic backlash in the US. Just imagine if the US government tried to do a conscription today in order to fight 6,000 miles away on a Chinese island. People would be livid, and it could even be a catalyst for revolution or civil war. The ruling class know this, and this is why they are using the most widespread propaganda and fear campaign in order to urge other peoples, like Australians, Japanese, and Taiwan residents, to fight mainland China in its stead. It truly is a brilliant propaganda campaign, but the question is, will it work again?